Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ideas Hive. My name is Kristen Anderson. I am the branch manager of Ideas for Us, and I'm so excited to talk with you all today about lab farmed foods with my friend Jeremy. So grab your popcorn, folks. We've got an interesting one today. But before we get into it, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about our Ideas for Us programming here in Orlando. So if you're not familiar with Ideas for Us, our mission is to develop, fund, and scale solutions that solve the world's most pressing environmental and social challenges. And we're able to do this by following a three-step model, which is educating, engaging, and mobilizing volunteers in climate solutions. We first educate our audiences through our monthly Hive meetings, where we bring in an expert on a topic to discuss a topic that aligns with one of the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. After they educate our audience, we usually engage them in a conversation about how can we solve this global problem with a local solution. But now in COVID times, we do it via online. And after we come up with those solutions, we bring them to life as we plan and organize with our amazing team of volunteers and eco-organizers. And then we implement those solutions through our monthly eco action projects so that we can have boots on the ground climate action. And every month, this looks a little bit different, as every month we focus on a different topic of sustainability, whether it's energy, water, food, waste, and ecology. So our eco action projects can range from solar workshops to shoreline restoration projects, tree plantings, and everything in between. So there's really no boundaries to what we can accomplish just based on the needs of the community. And we do this because we believe that climate education and solutions should be free and readily available to communities. And we're really unique in the sense we don't stop at the education and the advocacy. We want to give people hands-on opportunities to take action against climate change because we know that even locally, we can really make a difference. And so if you like what you see, please consider donating to support this mission. Every dollar donated goes to supporting climate solutions, either domestically or internationally. You can explore our website and pick out a project that you want to see accomplished, and you can donate directly to that project. And you can also learn more about different climate solution efforts going on globally through our podcast. But this month, we're going to be talking about the future of food with lab-grown meat with Jeremy Piacente from Lab Farmed Foods. Jeremy graduated from UCF in 2019 with his major in biomedical sciences. He did a lot of undergraduate research with some professors, but now he's working with Lab Farmed Foods, which is a startup company working on sustainable cell-cultured meat. And I'm super interested to hear about this and what it can mean for our future of food. So thank you so much, Jeremy, for being here today. I'll go ahead and give it over to you.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here. Hello, my fellow knights. Just want to throw this in real quick. If it wasn't for the Office of Undergraduate Research, I wouldn't have been able to find myself where I am today. As Kristen said, I'm working with a group called Lab Farmed Foods. We're based in New York City. We're one of over 40 different kinds of companies all over the world working on cultivated meat, cell-based meat, lab-grown meat, whichever nomenclature. Typically in the industry, people say cultivated or cell-based meats, but I can get into the nomenclature a little bit later. So now that I have you guys here, I would love to go through what cellular agriculture has the potential to do for the people, the animals, and the world. And we will be checking out the Cellular Agriculture Society's website. So this is an interactive experience. So feel free to scroll with me on their website, cellag.org. Or you could just watch the screen or whichever. But the Cellular Agriculture Society is a NGO, non-government organization, or a nonprofit, however you might like to call it, who's specifically trying to use creative outlets to help divulge the information about cellular agriculture because it can be a touchy subject. I mean, food, you know, it's like it's really literally integral to you as a human, and it's like it connects us with biology and everything, because everything you eat is biology. But anyways, so I'm going to go through this website and it'll let us uncover a little bit about cellular agriculture specifically. And please, if you have questions, write them down, and I look forward to answering them in the near future. So let's check this out. So here are 4 sectors of the website, and we're going to go through the first 3. If you guys want to check out the role of CAS, the Cellular Agriculture Society, I'm sure you might be able to find time or ask me a question. I used to do a little bit of work with them while I was at UCF, actually. So just going to keep moving through. So it's a grandiose statement, but as many of you are very aware, the animal agriculture industry consumes a large portion of, or emits a large portion of greenhouse gases. According to the UN, it's over 14% of all global greenhouse gases come from animal agriculture. And in the United States alone, 50% of the farmland that grows crops goes to make just beef. So that can give you an idea on how taxing meat, especially, but as well as general agriculture, can be for society, our global society. So in a nutshell, cellular agriculture, farming animal products from cells instead of animals. This can include meat. It can include leather, fur, dairy. There's actually a company right now working on that's selling the dairy, where they have yeast brew like lactose and other proteins that are found in the milk that you would otherwise get from a cow mother. They inserted those. They inserted the genes that the cow uses to make those proteins in their breast milk, but they have yeast to make it instead. So yeast don't have a nervous system, so there's no harm, as we understand. In this picture, so a vision for the future of meat production with cellular agriculture. Now, this is an idealistic view of what a factory or like a meat producing center might be in the near future, when cultivated meat ideally overtakes conventional slaughtered meat as part of the market share. In other words, right now 100% of all meat is conventional, right? So like my whole finger, yeah. It's all conventional, right? But, well, actually, my apologies. In December, Eat Just, which is a company in San Francisco, began to sell their cultured chicken nuggets in a restaurant in Singapore called 1880, I think. But that's the first place in history where you can purchase meat, real animal meat, where we'll go into it, that didn't require any death. But in this picture, right, anyways, so back to my analogy, it's like, so what? There's that tiny little sliver in Singapore that's making meat through cellular agriculture processes, but over time, as it becomes cheaper and more sustainable, it'll increase and increase and increase. And after it gets to the point where it's the majority, right, where it's the majority of my finger, they'll be more likely to have facilities like this one So when you visit a factory farm, you can't, because it's illegal apparently. Why is it illegal? Who knows? But the idea, well, I'm sure they don't want people to see it. But with cellular agriculture, the product will be grown in, a lot of people refer to them as fermenters, because they sort of look like the fermentation machines that people brew beer in. So this whole thing right here. But in reality, a fermenter is a bioreactor. So people use bioreactors to make beer, right? So this is a bioreactor. This bioreactor isn't a fermenting bioreactor. That's a different type of bioreactor, but it'll be a similar process. In a nutshell, a bioreactor is just a machine that encapsulates the living cells, the living organisms, to make whatever product you're making. So whether it's beer or meat or milk or what have you, this is a bioreactor. So the idea behind this vision is people will be able to tour the factories where the meat's produced. They can see it. There's transparency. The reason that these are covered is because cells don't respond well to light. They actually don't, like, they can die from like being exposed to like direct light for like a really long, it's just not good for them. But yeah, otherwise I'm sure it would be like see-through, but even if it was see-through, you really wouldn't see that much of it, because I mean, it's like microscopic. But anyways, I digress. So as I'm sure you guys can imagine, what is cellular agriculture doing? We're taking cells, the basic building blocks of life, and building those ourselves up into, you know, your hamburger or what have you, instead of having someone else labor over it and like have it be a part of them. So without the need to raise and slaughter the animals in order to get, you know, this, I mean, this is a delicious looking piece of food. Now this picture is not, as far as I know, is not from cell cultivation, but I can pull up some pictures if anyone has any questions about those. Remember to ask questions or write them down if you want. So, you know, we're doing this because, I mean, the advent of civilization, human civilization, began with basically domesticating organisms to fit our needs. So for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years, humans as we know it were hunter and gatherers, as you probably know. But there was an inflection point where they figured out you could kind of have gardens and amass enough food to the point where everyone in your society wouldn't have to spend all the time in their day trying to gain or gather food. You know, farmers were able to make food at a much higher rate and have people specialize in other kinds of work. But they needed to domesticate, you know, the crops as well as animals. And as our society has progressed through industrial revolutions, we've found ways to we found even more ways to make it more efficient, right? To make meat, or among other products, but especially in this case, meat. But it's just a really disgusting process. And I mean, we've kind of, I believe a lot of these corporations are kind of more just focused on the profit as opposed to some of the effects that it could have on our planet. So we are making a brand new method of food production in order to make the same food to respect animals and our planet. So as I said, there's different kinds of products that can be made. And I mean, there are companies working on all of these products that are being listed. And there's even some working on cotton. Some people have speculated about making wood. So the fun stuff with wood and cotton is it's a little less touchy, right, than meats, right? Some people might have a little bit of an ick factor regarding cultivated meat, but there might be there's most probably going to be less of a ick factor when it comes to like making in vitro wood or cotton. So I've explained a little bit of what cellular agriculture is. Now, it's important to understand why it's going to benefit our society, our social relationship with animals, and the entire planet as an ecosystem. So a major factor is that because we're removing animals from the picture, or more specifically, we're removing mass crowding of animals in very small locations. We can remove antibiotics, right? Because the whole problem with factory farming, especially, is that they want to have the highest margin possible. So they do whatever they can to make it as cheap as possible. So whether that be, stuffing as many animals into a very small pen with as little space as possible, like the minimum amount of space that the animal needs in order to just survive, like they don't care about the psychology of the animal as it develops. They just want to make sure that its physiology is up to the standard that they have to make the product. So they may even pump up the animals with different kinds of hormones to assist in making sure that they reach the weight that they're wishing for. And I mean, these can lead to some pretty significant problems in society. Obviously, we've seen what's going on with COVID right now, and we might all be pretty familiar with where that started in Wuhan, China. And some sources have pointed to a wet market in China, in Wuhan, for the origin. For those of you who are not aware of what a wet market is, it's basically like it's like an outdoor market where there's like living animals and you can like pick the ones that you want. So there are there's sources, and I can send this information if anyone's interested, about how it's believed to have come from a wet market. So anyways, if we can make meat without having to use these hormones, antibiotics, and having the risk of these foodborne diseases, it would be a lot more beneficial for our society, among several other reasons. But I failed to mention with foodborne disease, the bioreactors that you saw that make meat need to be kept sterile, right? Kind of like an operating room that a doctor has when they're when they have people like open with their hearts out or whatever. So those are kept sterile with engineering controls, right? Now, how does that differ from the factory farming? Well, with the factory farming, you can't clean a living, breathing animal so that it's like sterile. Like that's impossible. And it's impossible other than just like being bad for you. I mean, we have an innate relationship with the microorganisms on our skin and their gut. But that's neither here nor there. For those of you who do still eat meat, And I hope more people are eating, if you do choose that to eat meat, maybe choose to eat more chicken than, or fish, especially fish more than anything else. But, you know, with chicken, for example, if the chicken touches anything in your kitchen, you must now treat it like it's radioactive waste, right? Because of the whole salmonella potential. Not just potential, salmonella is found in every single chicken. It's just, I don't know the specific biology behind it. I would guess it has something to do with their microflora, just like we have a microflora in our gut. They have a microflora in their gut, which includes the salmonella. But anyways, so when you buy conventional chicken from the supermarket, you need to make sure it doesn't touch anything. And if it does touch anything, you need to wash it or whatever, right? Or you could get salmonella. Well, and there's been plenty of like beef recalls and this and that. With cellular agriculture, that won't be a problem, ideally, of course, because these things that I share, remember, these things that I share with you, we don't know if it's 100% true until it's like actually practiced. It's important to exercise our thinking here. But yeah, so I mean, some companies, they'll make meat and then they will kind of like test it for bacteria, right? And they'll compare it to conventional meat, and the conventional meat will always have I want to say at least like 3 magnitudes. So like 1,000 times more bacteria on the clean packaged chicken you might get from the supermarket. Whereas, you know, as I said, with the cell cultured meat, if there are other organisms growing in the bioreactor, there's no immune system to fight off those microorganisms. So they'll just eat everything if they got into the bioreactor. That's why there needs to be some serious engineering controls. And I mean, there are serious engineering controls vaccine production uses bioreactors. And for those of you who have some background with like biology or whatever, you might be familiar with some of the processes that it takes to get something like FDA approved. And that's like very long and convoluted, but you know, we're using the technologies that the FDA can approve. So that is interesting. But anyways, that about sums up just some of the benefits of cellular agriculture could have with people if cultivated meat is eaten on a large scale. So now we zoom in on animals. So obviously, where your meat comes from an animal. So our process, in essence, uses a fraction of the animal. So you might so sometimes people might go to the doctor, right? And the doctor will say, oh, like, we need to order like a tissue biopsy or something to see what's going on inside of you, right? So they'll like take a bit of skin or they might like take something out. Like people might get like different areas of their body might get biopsied, and then like they will receive a tissue sample, usually like the size of a grain of rice, and they'll bring that, the physician will bring that into an area to grow those cells. And then they grow the cells enough so that they could see how the cells are reacting. Those are your cells, right? They can see how the cells are acting when they grow them. So that can give ideas on how the patient is doing. So what we do is we take that technology and instead of having to kill an entire animal to harvest meat, you take a rice-sized biopsy from the animal and you put that in an environment that's the same environment that's found in the animal. So like 37 degrees Celsius with like a 5% CO2 concentration with all the vitamins and minerals that the cells need to keep dividing. And you just keep just the cells dividing, just the product, without growing unnecessary things like tails or faces. And that is the reasoning behind how this technology can be so much more sustainable than conventional meat technology, and done without killing the animal. Now, there's also, so here it says without animal suffering, right? So one might argue, well, the animal never, the animal didn't consent to you like taking a prick of it, right? And that's true. That's absolutely super duper true. So there's other methods. I can't get into the methods we use at Lab Farm Foods, but they're similar to this. I can tell you that we work with the stem cells. But so for example, with the amniotic fluid in a pregnant mother, there's often stem cells found floating in the liquid. So you can use those to grow. There's also, so Just Eat Just, they're the ones that are selling the chicken in Singapore. They claim that they take a feather from a chicken and then they cut off like a piece of it that's close enough to the skin where there's probably cells in it. And they induce those cells to become pluripotent stem cells. So there's different methods, but the go-to method that everyone in the industry uses as an example is the biopsy directly from the muscle of an animal. So it'll vary by company. And that'll be very important as these different groups start making their product. And whether it's GMO, whether it's not GMO, these are all different factors that these different companies are wrestling with different parts of it. You know, some companies, they basically genetically modify like excessive, like as much as possible to make it as cheap as possible, which I understand, and efficient as so by making it as cheap as possible, that opens the door to make it as efficient as possible. But again, we won't know 100% sure how sustainable it'll be. There's some research out there we'll get into in this presentation about the ideas of how sustainable it could be. But we will need to make a large mass and perform a life cycle assessment of it. So where all the materials come from, what kind of greenhouse effect, what kind of greenhouse gases get and resources are used in order to get those resources and then put them in the bioreactor and to power the bioreactor and to get the metal for the bioreactor and all these different variables, right? But I can send the paper and they'll go over this paper in this presentation. Which brings us actually to the whole sustainability assessment, right? So this technology is all fine and dandy, but it doesn't really matter unless it's more sustainable than cultivated meat. Conventional meat. So you can see here these numbers, up to 94% less water, up to 76% less greenhouse gases, up to 80% less land. So there's a paper published in the American Chemical Society paper. I can send that paper. I think it's Dr. Tunismo who wrote that at the University of Helsinki, I believe, or Oxford. I don't remember. But anyways, these are some of the numbers that we're looking at for potential decrease in resource use, whether that be land or water or emitting. So I guess I could say air, using the air, but please, if you would like to see the paper, just let me know. I would love to share that paper with you. But the big thing is without asking for mass behavior change, right? So I mean, some of you might be familiar with the United Nations Climate Paris Accord, COP21, right? The Paris Agreement that the president signed us back into, even though it's a non-binding agreement. But regardless, you know, according to the UN, if everyone on Earth became just vegetarian tomorrow, every country would meet their goal in the Paris Climate Accord. Right? It's kind of astounding if you weren't familiar with that already, but that would be asking for mass behavioral change. And humans, the human psyche is like really, especially in more developed nations, they're really like set on the way that they want to act. And it can be hard to force someone to change, even if it's for the greater good. So if you give them an option to change, if you give them an option to change without them having to perceive that they're changing, it could have a great effect. I mean, I think that's what Tesla is doing. So this is the 90 Reasons publication that CAST has put together. It goes much more extensively into the benefits of cellular agriculture if it is consumed on a majority kind of scale and done sustainably. So feel free to download it. I've read it. It's, I mean, it gives you a lot of hope and it makes you really believe in this kind of technology if you don't already believe in it. But I mean, I had already believed in it before this was published. And after reading it, I was like, wow, there's a lot of angles in there that I hadn't even really considered. Now I will say, but yeah, it's a nice little publication. It doesn't take that long to read. There's a lot of pretty pictures there as well, since it's on the Cell Agriculture website, because they're really big on making sure that the presentation of cellular agriculture is done like, I don't want to say it to a T, but to the best possibility, because unfortunately, not everyone in the animal industry agree with what we're doing, and there will be pressure against them, which will very likely be slander. So the cellular ag CAST as an entity is really important to provide people a perspective on this technology that isn't tainted with, I mean, even though like, I'm pretty sure you won't see the term lab grown meat on this website, because there have been consumer interest surveys that were like calling the meat like in vitro meat, like lab grown meat. It just doesn't fly with the consumer. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's what this is. It's like, it's capitalism. We need to sell this product without asking for mass behavioral change. So we need to get these people on our side. We need to say, hey, you know, you can get the same meat that you've always eaten without having to like you won't even tell, because it'll be packaged the same exact way. I mean, like when you go to the supermarket and you buy meat, if you do decide to do that. The animal agriculture industry does everything they absolutely can to make you forget where that comes from. That's why it looks so clean. But anyways, it's just a little bit of their medicine. So, I mean, this is like a really nice quote to read. I hope they come true. We won't know until, things happen. But the ball's rolling. Feel free to sign up if you want, and we'll get into how does it work. I got into it a little bit with the biopsy thing, and they'll go over that again here. So I guess I didn't even think about the waste. So the waste generation actually, so cells, so with cellular agriculture, the idea of a circular economy might be a lot easier, because you might be able to give the waste products from the cells that the cells make, and maybe give it to the algae, which can like break it down and like clean it, and then like you might either be able to use that for fuel, or that might be, you might be able to use the algae itself to help grow the animal cells or the fish cells or whichever cells you might be making. But they're not going to go over that in this presentation. But I was working on that in Chicago for a different company before. But yeah, so tissue engineering and fermentation. So cellular agriculture would be the tissue engineering, right? So that's like making meat. That's making sushi, right? That's making sushi without microplastics or potential parasites, right? There's fermentation or acellular agriculture, right? So beer, that's been done for thousands of years, wine, whatever. You know, Perfect Day in San Francisco, they're selling the ice cream made with true milk proteins, just made without the cow. That's considered acellular agriculture because the product is not the cell itself, like the meat. The product is something the cell makes, so it's acellular. So there's also like gelatin, among other things. So for the tissue engineering, right, to make cellular agriculture possible, to make cultivated meats, right? You know, I mentioned taking the cells from the animal. So here it says, take a one-time harmless biopsy, right? So depending on where it comes from, right? So if you genetically modify them significantly, you could make it one time. You could really make that one time. But if you're trying to make it organic, you might have to keep coming back for it, or you might want to use stem cells. So we use stem cells, which, I mean, stem cells are found naturally in the body. And I mean, the labeling of GMO or not, I mean, I believe it's not GMO because we don't go in there with CRISPR or anything, but that's up to the USDA, FDA to decide. But anyway, so yeah, you take the biopsy from the animal, right size piece, and so you introduce it to the bioreactor. You introduce it to the bioreactor here. Now you need to feed it. You feed yourself to grow. The cells need to eat just like you. So, you know, you're going to give them the vitamins, the minerals, the sugars, the same things that the cells in your body need. You know, I mean, if you go into some of the labs at UCF, you know, they're using the same technologies that our industry is using, except instead of researching for like medicine and trying to make new drugs or whatever, or study cancer or study diseases, we're trying to study how to make this as efficiently as possible. So you need to give the cells the environment they need with the food that they need, and that's all done in the bioreactor. That's going to require a lot of engineering. So if anyone's interested in this stuff and you have an engineering background or you like math's fun, you know, it's great. That would be really helpful because we don't want to go like the biofuel industry did back in the 90s, because there was a lot of promise with that, and many people believe it fell short because there weren't enough engineers, but I am digressing. So now it's specification, right? Now, you could read this if you want, but what I will say, right? So you need to differentiate the cells into wherever you're going, right? So, so a stem cell, the reason why it's called stem cell is, perfect. So it's like, it's like this orange, right? So this orange, imagine it to be a stem cell, right? It's a stem cell. They're typically found in the early stages of like embryo development, right? The earlier you go, the more stem cells there will be. Over time, your stem cell can turn into any other cell in your body, right? So it could differentiate into like this muscle cell, or like this like fat tissue, right? And then we might just like, right? Yeah, we gotta line them up together and to make your meat products, right? But if that's not clear enough, right? So everyone might know about the genome. Remember to write down your questions. Everyone might know about the genome, right? Or DNA. DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, is found in all organisms, whatever. The DNA is found in all of your cells. DNA makes up your genome, which is also found in all of your cells. A copy of the genome is found in every single cell in your body except red blood cells. But that's like for a different reason. So what the genome is kind of like it's like, think of it as like a textbook or think of it as a library, the genome, right? And when you go to the library, you want to learn something. You want to learn how to build something, right? You want to learn how to build a car from the library, whatever. So you go to the library and you find a book, and it's like, okay, this is a book on how to build a table or a car or whatever, right? So now you want to know how. So obviously you read your genome, whatever, but you might not remember all of it. So you want to like take down some notes. So basically what you do is you'll transcribe a little bit of it. You'll take some notes. You don't want to rip out a page from the book, because then you can't use the book anymore, you know? But if you transcribe some notes, right? And then you bring that to your workshop, or the ribosome in the cell, you can build different proteins which have different functions, and then these different protein functions will take your stem cell and push them into this direction or this direction, right? So that's why my hand, all the cells in here have the instructions on how to make an eyeball, but there's no eye in this hand or here, right? Just here. They're only here because the proteins that were built were able to be transcribed from the library book, specifically for this, right? In a nutshell. So anyways, that's the basis of the specification, the differentiation of your cells. This will be like a lot longer of a process if you're using stem cells, because if some of these companies will be using the muscle biopsies, as I said. Now, when you take the muscle biopsy, what they want to do is so you'll have muscle, whatever, right? And some of the muscle, like the muscles are mostly completely grown, but there's a couple satellite stem cells in there. Now, basically what happens is when you like lift weights or when you run or do physical activity, you tear muscle fibers, right? And when you tear muscle fibers, there's signals, usually proteins, get released that then satellite cells will read the signals, and they'll interpret it as I need to start dividing now, and they'll divide, and that's how you grow. That's how the muscles in your body grows. So some people will be working with muscle stem cells, but they have to go through less differentiation. So for example, right, so they'll go muscle stem cell or satellite stem cell, myocyte, and then myotube. And then the myotubes, it's like this over here, and that's pretty much what makes up the muscle in the meat, right? But if you're going the stem cell route, you're gonna need to go through a little more steps. You're gonna need to induce the mesoderm, and then you need to induce somites, and then you need to induce like different parts of the somite to get the muscle progenitors, which will then become the satellite stem cells, and then blah blah blah, right? So it varies, right? So all these different companies, they have all of these different strategies on how they're gonna make their sustainable meat, right? So, after you isolate from whatever method, stem cells or directly from the animal, you got to put it in the bioreactor with the medium to feed the cells. You keep them growing till there's enough. Specify them, differentiate them into what you need, and then once you have enough, you harvest it, and you you align it into whatever method. In a nutshell, just see this piece of steak. I mean, like, that's not like, you need to get that from the cow, right? You need to get this thing from this, right? So they had to harvest it from this through whatever means necessary, right? So we're doing a process like they did and giving it this presentation, but without killing it. So that's some of the nitty gritty when it comes to the technology behind it. And they're also doing this with collagen to make leather. And they do the similar process. Sure. Thank you so much. So I mentioned the thing with Perfect Day, that company making the ice cream, right? So it's a similar, I mean, not similar, it's the same thing that I was saying, but I'll just, I'll break it down a little quicker again, right? So here's the cow, right? So the cow can make milk, whatever. There's genes that allow it to make milk. So you just find the genes that you need, and you got to feed them into the host microorganism. I don't think the diagram does a very good job at doing that, but so you basically need to like insert them into the yeast or whatever model organism, host organism you're using, and then you grow that in a bioreactor as well, right? But this will be a fermenter, just like beer. It'll be like pretty much exactly the same process. So then, some people might have these cells, like they might have them secrete it, or they might have to like break open the cells and purify it, but they have to purify it some way. Getting them to secrete it will make the purification process a lot easier. And once you purify your proteins, you can get to your final product. So they're also doing this with eggs. So Clara Foods in San Francisco as well is making egg whites currently. That about wraps up, the presentation. I just wanted to pull up that pretty picture. But does anyone have any questions?
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely have some questions, and I'm excited to take them from the comments as well. So if you're watching, please put your questions in the comments. And thank you so much, Jeremy. I feel like I learned more from this presentation than my entire molecular cell biology class. So I really appreciate it. So yeah, if you have questions, please put them in the comments. I'm going to get started with some of my own questions as well. So basically, my first question is, like, you're basically taking meat cells, right, from the cow? So like muscle cells.
Some companies are doing that, yeah.
Okay, but you won't disclose your secrets. And
Well, we use
then,
stem cells.
okay.
Yeah, my boss is the first person to derive human muscle cells from human stem cells. But someone did that with mice before he did anyway, so.
Wow, that's really interesting. Um, it seems like the milk and the is harder than the meat. Is that correct? Because when you went through that process, it looked like that was a lot more complicated because you had to have a host organism.
Nope. It's actually in the 1980s they technically started doing this with insulin. So originally you had to synthesize insulin by purifying it from like the livers of cows and pigs, but they induced E. coli to make insulin instead in Berkeley, I think. So, and actually Perfect Day is selling their products with the milk, or at least the ice cream for now. So they were the first like cellular agriculture product, if we don't count yeast or rennet.
It's called Perfect Day.
Yep, Perfect Day.
So that gets into one of my other questions, moving away from the science and more of the motives, and also where it's available. So there are companies right now that are selling these products that we could purchase theoretically.
There is one company selling the cultivated chicken in Singapore, in one restaurant in Singapore. There's nowhere else where they're legally selling it. In a couple places in the Israel, there are some companies that are working on like putting together a restaurant for people to go to, and they wouldn't pay. They would be picked and then they could eat it. And they also are looking at doing this in San Francisco as well, with, what's the name? Mission Barnes is the name of the company that's doing that.
So from your perspective, how long do you think it'll take before this becomes on like the mainstream market?
At least 10 years, truly. But I may be mistaken completely, because the other day, one of the Israeli companies released that one of their chicken patties only cost $10 to make. So I might be completely incorrect, and it might be like next year. I have no idea. I have no idea what these other companies are doing.
Science works fast, but it's really cool that you're kind of being a pioneer in this whole movement. And just to clarify, this is something that's completely different from stuff like Beyond Meat and Impossible Meat, right? That's plant-based, and this is actually cell cultivation.
Yes, cell cultivated. Some people call it cell-based. It is completely different than plant-based, but with the similar goals. So ours is real meat because it is an animal part, but theirs is engineered to resemble the animal. But I love a Beyond Burger.
Yeah, I had plant-based meat for dinner, actually. It was delicious. And so kind of getting into the motives, how much of this work is motivated by environmental benefits versus the ethics of animal treatment, and which is easier to sell to the public, environmental or ethical reasons?
I don't know the answer to this question. There are some consumer interest surveys that have been done. So they basically ask people like, would you eat this? No? Okay. Well, what if we told you this, right? So from my general understanding, it seems like there's a little bit more, at least monetary investment interest for environmental reasons. But I mean, there's also a lot of animal ethics groups that are interested in these technologies. Like even like PETA has been interested. There's different like ocean sanctuary groups that are interested.
Oh, awesome. If PETA is on board, then it's got to be a-okay. So does this development have any implications for the future of food insecurity? Because I know right now the science is pretty new, and like you said, it's $10 to develop like one hamburger, for example. But in the future, I read somewhere that this could be mass produced at a very cheap rate, and it could end up being one of the solutions to world hunger. And I just wanted to know what the reality of that is, just from your opinion.
Well, from my understanding, uh, it's the problem with world hunger is more of a distribution problem than a supply problem. So we make enough food for all people on Earth. It's just hasn't been there hasn't been an economic incentive for innovations in the distribution to end the world hunger. Unfortunately. So I think if more people got into optimizing the distribution, we could end the current state of world hunger without specific like food innovations. But meat consumption is predicted to rise as the world population is going to increase, I believe, to 10 billion by 2050. So more nations on Earth are going to become more and more developed, and there may be more and more people that wish to consume more animal proteins into their diet. So ideally, we would be able to provide for such new growth without having to hurt the planet as much as the conventional agriculture is doing, conventional animal agriculture is doing.
Mm-hmm. And as we're kind of talking about that, is there any really work being done to transition livestock farms to labs? Any incentives? Since I'm sure people are investing in your research, this is probably something that investors are looking to as a future solution. So is there any real work being done to make this transition? And is it a realistic goal to pursue to completely transition to labs instead of livestock farms?
So I don't think it'll ever completely transition, because I think what might happen is if it becomes like a mass majority, there will still be like a small minority of it'll kind of be like specialty, where it'll be kind of like a more of a fine dining kind of aspect of like, oh, this is from like this is from a slaughtered animal. Kind of more how things were before factory farming was developed in the United States. But regarding transitioning of farms, I know there are several programs out there that are working on like helping the farmers transition. One group's called the Farm Transformation Institute, and I know that in Israel, some of the groups are working with the farmers specifically for like a premise of having the bioreactor on their farm. But being in proximity to the animals will make it a lot easier. I know we are in contact with farmers because we also want to work with them. But ultimately, it's not going to change like tomorrow. Right? It's not going to change. It's not going to happen overnight. So what's going to happen is these companies are going to have like they're going to be, they're going to have like this like pillar of meat that's made, right? They need to have this many animals like constantly like have babies, right? But they're going to see over time as it decreases, they're going to have to like reduce the amount, right? They're going to have to reduce the amount of animals that they're like forcing to have babies. And then like it'll decrease ideally and then more until it's like very, very sliver. So that's just my thoughts on it though.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, as you said, the global population is growing at an astronomical rate. And I don't even know if there's enough room on the planet for all the cows to feed everybody. So, this might have to be the future, at least where it can be. And I also read into it a little bit that, it reduces so much land waste, so much water waste, and so many emissions from the cows, but it still does have quite an energy cost. And I was wondering if there are any efforts to make the process more energy efficient.
That would be related to the engineering side of it, which is not my line of expertise specifically, but theoretically, if it's done on a clean energy grid, then it'll be a little less imposing of an energy use. But the projections are still, I want to say, at least 40% lower energy use than conventional, because they still need to distribute the fertilizer and the water, and I mean, at least with chickens, they need to keep the chickens at like a very constant temperature inside of their big houses. But again, we're going to need to see like a legitimate like life cycle analysis of the whole thing to really truly see. But I know for a fact that people are interested in trying to make it as efficient as humanly possible.
Yeah, awesome. And either way, it's better. It's more sustainable. Obviously, that's almost undoubtable. And also, in regards to ethics of the whole system, so how much does the ethical line vary in your field? Are there debates as to the point where you consider meat a living being?
So in regards to that, the nice thing about what we're doing is we're never making like a nervous system. So what we make won't be able to perceive pain. But regarding your ethics question, Cargill and Tyson have invested in this industry. So Cargill and Tyson are two of the 5 largest meat manufacturers in the United States. And, they commit a lot of ethical violations when it comes to their animal agriculture business. So people are going to need to stay very vocal in order to ensure that we retain the control of the ethics behind the way that this food is made. Just because Cargill tossed a couple bucks doesn't mean that they run the company. But if they open their own company, then that becomes a whole different thing. And then it turns into kind of that with extra steps quote, right? Because I mean, if people are like, instead of like growing chickens in factory farms and like killing them, they might be growing chickens in factory farms and like constantly taking biopsies from them. That's also really horrible. If maybe even worse, because they might just have, because chickens, for example, I believe they have a lifespan of like 10 years, but broiler chickens are taken to be slaughtered at like day 45 or something, like between 40 and 50 days. And by that time, they're not able to walk around anymore, because they've grown so much mass, they can't like support their own body weight because of the selective breeding practices that the animal agriculture industry has employed onto their animals. But yeah, it's just important to stay vocal about what's happening and to stay asking questions about like how these companies are going about it. That's why I think transparency is really important, and that's why I really love what the Cellular Agriculture Society has done with the idea of that literal, very open meat cultivating facility. You know, if you go back to the picture, you might see that there's like, they have like some guy like brought his like family to like look at like how it's being made. You know, you can't do that with the factory farm. So we want people to ask questions. I keep emphasizing questions. It's very important, not just for me, but for everyone and for everything in life. But
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that transitions well into another question, which is how can regular people, what can companies to make ethical decisions and maybe hopefully soon transition to this type of meat? Like you were saying, staying local, putting your money where your mouth is, maybe.
I think engaging with companies on social media is a great way of putting them on the spot. But often what you might end up running into is they can't tell you because it's like proprietary or whatever. But I believe that the more transparent that the company will be, the more successful it'll be, because the more people will trust it. Because again, at the end of the day, this is like if I hadn't told you guys all of these potential benefits, if I just came in here like, oh yeah, we're trying to grow like meat, like in a lab, whatever, isn't that cool? Do you want to buy it? Like no one wants to buy that. But, you know, even in the consumer interest surveys, you got to introduce like the potential benefits. But with that, it's coupled to, it's like, if we're gonna be out here preaching, it's better for the planet and for people and for animals, whatever, you really need to like stick to it. You know, if that's your like selling point, then you really got to do it, you know? But I believe
absolutely.
with the way that the tech industry has like been met with a lot of like transparency issues and has caused a lot of like distrust from the public. I like to believe, right, that will lead to the cellular agriculture industry to learn from their mistakes, so that there's no zuck of cultivated meat, to keep it short.
Really interesting. And that's a great charge for everybody listening as well. And, you know, it'd be great to end that on that. But I have a couple other questions that I was just kind of curious about. When you take a sample to, you know, grow the other cells from, can you just pretty much take one sample and you're good to go? Or does that have like a stopping point for how far that one sample can go? Or is it like an infinite amount since it's continuing to grow other cells?
We use stem cells and differentiate them into progenitor cells, which keep growing. They don't go into quiescence, right? Quiescence is basically when the cell is like, all right, I'm not going to divide anymore. This is getting dangerous. This could be like, is this cancer, right? Those are some of, there's like biological processes you all have in your bodies to prevent like excessive growth like that, right? But when you, when some groups take a biopsy from an animal, if they decide not to, so their muscle progenitors are only, you can only find them in like an embryo, right? Because the muscle progenitors, they are lining the like fetus, the embryo, with like muscle to make like to develop your body, right? But when you take it from like an adult animal, all they have that can divide are satellite stem cells, because those are the ones that, you know, when you tear muscle fibers, they get activated and they divide. Those will go into quiescence. Actually, a satellite stem cell is constantly in quiescence until it receives the signal from muscle tearing to divide. Now, I think maybe to get around genetically modifying it to just grow and grow and grow, people might feed it the factors that are found in the body when you tear muscle fibers to keep them from going into a quiescent state. But I am speculating completely right now.
It's all new science, so it's very interesting, and I really appreciate your time and insight. And so thank you so much for your time. And, like you said, we need to follow you guys on social media and other businesses that are doing the same. So maybe we can put it in the comments or we can share it later. But it's really exciting stuff for our future. So thank you so much for all the work that you and Lab Farm Foods are doing. So now I'm going to go ahead and get into our upcoming events.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, yes, of course. So we have a community cleanup coming up next Saturday, February 13th at Lake Baldwin with O-Town Compost. Please come out to that. It's going to be a really nice day. We're going to walk around the park and pick up trash. We have an environmental justice workshop with Potter Latinx and Fridays for Future on the last Thursday of the month, I believe, or Wednesday. So please come out to that. We're going to hear from Christy Drutman about the introduction to environmental justice. And then we have a garden maintenance also with Potter Latinx over at our Audubon Covenant Church community garden. We're going to be redoing the composting site there. So if you want to get involved, please sign up on our Eventbrite. And then our next Hive is going to be about wildlife conservation with Tracy Dean, the Executive Director of Conservation Florida. So you're not going to want to miss that for our Ecology Month. Next month, we have a lot of exciting stuff going on as we're getting into spring. So please stay tuned on all of our eco action projects. And if you want to get more involved, we still have room in our internship program, and we would love to, equip you with the knowledge that you need for this kind of work in nonprofit and climate action. One fundraiser that I really want to shout out really quick is a bamboo planting fundraiser from our Uganda team. They're working to help climate refugees and also heal an ecosystem surrounding a village of farmers. And so please go on our website and find that fundraiser on their page and donate. They're still about $800 short, but thank you everybody who's donated so far. We raised some funds, so they're definitely going to be able to plant some bamboo, but in order to completely restore the ecosystem, we're looking for a few $100 more. So if you're able to, please consider that, or you can share it on social media. But thank you all so much for joining us today. We're really excited for our upcoming eco action projects and continuing to learn with you all and also implement these climate solutions in our community. So thank you all so much, and I'll see you next time.